Welcome to the Iowa City Community School District School Board meeting on Tuesday, August 23rd. I heard it was school leave, but some people are happy about that, some aren't, so I won't even bring it up. But welcome to school tomorrow. I want to thank those in the audience and those on TV for taking an interest in our district business. I'd like to call this meeting to order and introduce those at the table with me tonight. To my right is Superintendent Steve Murley, and then Directors Lori Rotland, Phil Hemingway, Brian Persling, Tasha Deloche, Paul Rosler, Chris Liebig, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. The public is reminded if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is community comment. You're reminded to give your name, address, and the topic you wish to speak. You may talk to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda and agenda items shall take place now and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. Initial community comment to the degree necessary will be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment shall take place at the end of the meeting. To the extent you are commenting on items not on our posted agenda, the board may ask follow-up questions of speakers, but is prohibited by Iowa open meetings laws from responding to questions from speakers or engaging in substantive discussion regarding non-agenda items. Got 2 speaker forms. Ruthina Malone and Brian Skefflins is on deck.
Hi, Ruthina Malone, 2638 Catskill Court, and I'll be addressing the board tonight about the superintendent evaluation and equity concerns. Good evening, my name is Ruthina Malone, and I've been a member of the school community for the last 11 years due to having a child in attendance at 3 of our great schools. First, I would like to urge the board to finalize Superintendent Murley's evaluation and share those results with the community. As we enter a new school year, this should be something addressed since it has been an ongoing agenda item for the last few board meetings. I'm sure that there are many facets to its evaluation, but I believe that the community has a right to be informed of his overall performance from the eyes of our elected board. The community is looking forward for all of you to share any concerns or praises that you may have. Additionally, the board may benefit from offering an opportunity for feedback from the school community related to his performance. If the directors are contemplating ending his contract, the board should take into account that a potential search for a new superintendent will cost the district several thousands of dollars, time, effort that would take away from other pressing issues. I feel that he and the school community deserves to have a resolution to what appears to be a very lengthy evaluation period. Secondly, I recognize that Equity Director Botchway highlighted the next steps regarding the report shared at the last meeting, referencing the results from a survey our students took last spring. But I want to express some concerns that parents of minority and lower SES students have shared in my presence. This survey conducted by the Public Policy Center tells us that our children could possibly do better in school and feel part of their school community if they had positive and supportive teacher-mentor relationships. In addition, it seems that each school year, we as a community highlight very concerning information regarding our children of color and lower SES found in the district's annual progress report that has consistently shown for several years that a large number of children of color from 3rd through 11th grades are below proficiency ratings in reading, math, and science with little improvement, and that they are being disciplined for infractions at a much higher rate than some of their classmates. However, our attention seems to be diverted to other issues that appear resolved by one board, but when a new board is elected, comes back up and stays an agenda item for several meetings. The board has to show the community that issues affecting a large population of our kids are just as equally as important as others. Hopefully you all have had some time to read these reports and use the information from them as a lens to see that it should be highly concerning to all of us within this district when we have Black, Latino, and lower SES students reporting that they don't feel as though their teachers are invested in them, that they don't believe that they're receiving supportive treatment, that their mentors are not teachers, that they don't have mentors and teachers that they can see themselves in, and that they are below proficiency in subjects. The report offered a salient recommendation of increasing the recruitment and retention of teachers from diverse social backgrounds. After reading several recent hire reports of teachers and administrators of the district and looking over some of our annual reports that shows minimum progress in this arena, I suggest the board conduct an equity audit that not only look at the district's hiring practices, but also the retention of non-white teachers and administrators. We all have seen some of our teachers and administrators of color leave the district after only being here for a short period of time. As a community, we need to know if the district is conducting exit interviews to find out why they are leaving, if they are leaving the area or just leaving our district, and to see if those leaving could offer suggestions on what could be done to keep them here. The results need to be shared with the community to show if we are making any strides towards improving the district for all those that are being served.
Thanks, thanks, Regina.
Thank you.
Thank you for Regina. Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Sekowitz. I live at 1639 Dickinson Lane, and I'm talking about the transfer, opening up the transfers. I want to thank you for giving me this time to talk. I know you've all had a tough decision to make through all this whole process of where to draw the lines, and you'll never make everybody happy. I already know that. My feeling is when you start a child on a path, you should continue it and encourage to follow through to the end. As I chose where I live is how close all the schools are to us. Now I realize the new school that was put in changed a lot of those boundaries. I could live with the decision if you had sent my daughter to Northwest when she left Grant Wood. That did not happen. Now she enters her last year at Southeast. This is where she ends up on a totally different path than the one that was in place when we moved to the neighborhood. I do have a 3-year-old that when he is ready to go to school and his route is different, I'm fine with that. That will have been in the plan when he starts his journey. So I'm asking you to reconsider opening the transfers to allow the children to stay in their current path, whether it be city or west, that they choose where to finish. I think opportunity to finish what they started amongst their friends or teammates set good examples of following a plan through till the end. I understand that buses may not be available in our neighborhood if we choose to transfer, but it could be if they walk 2 blocks north of where I live. That's all that separates city and west in our neighborhood. City is by far closer. If she wants to go to west, she would not be if she was to go to west, she'd not be the closest school in her neighborhood. I want to leave you with this thought. If you live close to Hy-Vee and I told you could not shop there, you need to go to the one that is 6 miles farther away, not because it's a better store, but because the food comes from a different place. Would you care where it came from? No. It's just food. Our kids don't care where their friends come from either. They're kids, they're their friends. We would like to keep them together. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. That's it for community comment. Next item on the agenda is the business consent agenda. Entertain a motion.
I was going to move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'd like to pull a couple of things from it.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second, or do you want to withdraw it?
Second.
So there's a motion and a second. What were the items?
7, 8, 11, and 12.
7, 8, 11, 12. Okay, we either go to vote or withdraw the motion, so want to go to vote or withdraw the motion? Guess we're going to vote?
I don't plan to withdraw the motion.
All right. So if you want to withdraw the items, vote no. If you want to withdraw the items, vote no.
Okay.
Who reviewed the bills?
I did.
Paul and I did.
Any update? I'll look.
Everything looked good. The couple questions that I had were answered, so I thought they were fine.
All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries. Whoops. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to have you vote again. They all clicked to not present at vote. Let's try this again. I'm sorry, if you'd like to try that again. Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Deloach, Kirschling, Lynch, and Ressler voting yea, and Directors Liebig, Hemingway, and Rutland voting nay.
All right, thanks, Kim. Next item on the agenda is open enrollment and voluntary transfer. Just a little background on this topic. So one, the agenda items take action on reopening secondary enrollment to open enrollment and voluntary transfer. And for background, in September of 2014, basically administration asked the board to take action to close City and West and Southeast. And the rationale was we were basically well over capacity at all those three schools, and there was no immediate plan to resolve that. And therefore, if you applied for open enrollment or voluntary transfer, it just wasn't going to happen. So he asked for board approval to close that.
That's correct, and by Iowa state statute, it requires action by the board to close your district to open enrollment at any individual grade level, and so that's not something that we can do administratively. We have to turn to you as a board to make that as a policy decision.
But that was already happening as far as voluntary transfers, right? Because our policy says you can't transfer in if it's over capacity.
That's internally for voluntary transfers, that's correct. Open enrollment comes from outside the district in, and again, that requires board action.
And does the state put any constraints on when we can or can't do that?
You have the ability to make, state statute says you have the ability to make that decision if your school exceeds capacity. So if your student enrollment exceeds your stated capacity for the building, then as a board you have the right to close that grade level or that school to open enrollment.
But if it doesn't,
If it doesn't, you do
we don't
not.
have the ability and we have to take open enrollees?
The former state law required that both the receiving and the sending district had to sign off on that. That is no longer a requirement. So essentially, if they meet the deadline and they have appropriate cause, then you have the requirement to accept them as open enrollment students.
Cause?
You do have the right. They have to follow the process in there, and they have a stipulated set of causes for you to use before and after that deadline. So if you apply before the deadline, it's simply meeting the deadline. If you apply after the deadline, then you have to meet one of those state-required causes in order to be open enrolled into the district. You do retain the right to assign the students inside the district. And so, for instance, at the elementary level right now, if you apply, we have many schools that are full. So we have very few schools that have openings at individual grade levels, and that's how we place kids that come to us under open enrollment at the elementary level.
I mean, I guess I don't mean to jump ahead, and maybe I could just let you're done. Okay. If we anticipate that we're going to have room at all three schools,
Yes.
do we have any choice as to how we vote on this proposal to lift that prohibition? Or are we required by state law to lift the prohibition?
When we reach that point, we may be required to take students depending on where our enrollment falls at that point in time. So that would be a
You
wait
could put
and
it off
see.
until the very last moment if you wanted to.
Right, we'd have to wait, that year we'd have to go through that BEDS process and collect our enrollment, see where we're at in terms of capacity.
I mean, I guess
My
what I'm
presumption would
wondering,
be
yeah.
yes.
What I'm wondering is, I mean, are we stuck with sort of the idea that even though we might be denying some people who are in West and want to go to City or vice versa because we don't have enough seats for all the people who want it, at the same time we are required to take all the people who are coming in from other districts?
Yes. And again, right now, just as a reminder, and I know this has been emphasized in the past, we are a net loser when it comes to the per pupil cost. We send more students out of the district than we bring inside the district. So we were very measured in our request that you close open enrollment at that point in time, because obviously that's a money loser for the district. Now that we see that we presume we're going to have open seats in all 3 schools, we think that it's appropriate at this point in time to reopen open enrollment and encourage students from outside the district to come in.
Since I went back and looked at the budget book, but over the last few years, and just going back to 2010, our trend for open enrollment out, actually going back to 2001, our trend for open enrollment out, it used to be like 92 students were open enrolling out. Now the net is minus like 332 at just under $6,500 per student.
That's correct.
We're writing checks out to surrounding districts for about 2.1 million, I believe. Right?
Approximately correct.
And since we closed down in December 2014 open enrollment, that number has grown by, I think, $500,000, if not 600,000.
Went from 1.6 to 2.1.
Yeah, so $500,000. So that's a trend we need to flip.
Well,
That's a trend that's going to flip. But then, I mean, for me, this thing is about what do students from residing outside of Iowa City Community School District have more options than students residing within, right?
Well, I guess one of my follow-up questions is when you open enroll in, are you opening enrolling into the district or into a particular high school?
You're opening enrolling into the district.
So they don't get to choose the high school they go to.
You don't get to choose at
Well,
any
that takes
level
the
where
edge
you're
off
at.
of that, then.
And actually, I'd say that probably another reason that you're seeing that trend accelerating is if you think about our elementary schools and the 49 modular units that we have scattered throughout the district, many of our elementary schools are full, so there's no room there. So when someone applies to open enroll into the district, we accept them and then we tell them where we have openings, and that may not be where they prefer to go because of which area they're moving into the district, and it may not be geographically proximate to them, and that may not fit their needs. And so we're seeing fewer and fewer kids able to open enroll in because of our overcrowding at all levels, and then where those openings are. And so one of our hopes, obviously, is that as the facility master plan continues to move forward and we create adequate seating for those inside the district and some excess capacity, eventually we'll be able to be open not only at our secondary schools, but at more of our elementary schools.
So, but I guess the question then is, would it be our practice once this is undone to try to accommodate as many voluntary transfers as we can of our own students before deciding where to assign the open enrollees that we have
I'm
to
sorry, I
take?
misunderstood your question. Yeah. So from an open enrollment standpoint, again, outside in, we follow state statutes on that. Voluntary transfers inside the district, we have the ability to set our own process and protocol for that. That allows us to set timing for those voluntary transfers. One of the things that we've talked about with secondary administrators is making sure that our voluntary transfers at the secondary level coincide with that date of March 1st for open enrollment, because we want to make sure that we're able to consider those moves simultaneously with the open enrollment applications. We also want to make sure that we have that number available in each school from an enrollment standpoint as we get ready to do staffing at each of those schools.
Now, the example that was brought up in community comment seemed very reasonable. Is that something that we can accommodate?
Again, voluntary transfers, the board has the ability to set any voluntary transfer policy that they want to, and once that's done, then we'll go ahead and set administrative guidelines and procedures to make that work.
It just depends on capacity, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But the open enrollees, if we take an open enrollment from another district, they come in 9th grade, are they there then through 12th grade?
They are.
Not like voluntary transfers,
That's correct.
under our current policy at least. If there's, just so I can get a sense of how it works. So suppose there's 100 open seats at Liberty High, and we got 100 people from West High that want to transfer to Liberty High. And we got 100 people from, Clearview Humana that want to come into our district, probably to go to Liberty High, but, they're just applying to be in the district. We're gonna move those 100 kids from West to Liberty and then say, well, you're welcome to come in, but you got to go to West?
We could do that.
Would that normally be the way we would handle that, or would we try to balance it a little bit?
We haven't done the secondary one in such a long time that we haven't updated any guidelines and procedures for it because they've been full for so long that hasn't been an issue. For some times, City High was open, And so anyone who was applying to come in was essentially told the open seats are at City High. We had very few voluntary transfer requests to move into City High, so we had the ability to accommodate both. So that wasn't a challenge for us, so we didn't have to set which comes first and how does that process work. That wasn't something that operationally was a challenge for us.
But you could do that, Chris, or we could close it if capacity, again, at the secondary level became a constraint.
I guess it seems to me like doing this for open enrollment is a very separate issue from doing this for voluntary transfers. Not that you wouldn't do it both, but it raises different issues, and it kind of seems like we already have a policy about voluntary transfers that you can't do it if there's no capacity for you there. Yeah.
As a board, decide to open up transfers from outside the district, but
Open enrollment,
open
yes.
enrollment, sorry, but to hold off on allowing voluntary transfers. Let's just, for example, say until Liberty has a full run of classes in there, so we can see what the enrollment looks like, and then opening it up inside the district.
As a board, you have the right to determine whatever policy is appropriate for voluntary transfers based on local needs. So that winds up being a complete local control issue. So you can make that determination at any point that you wish to. One of the things that we did 2 years ago now was we said that voluntary transfers would be an annual application process because we had essentially the problem that Director Liebig was describing just a moment ago, where you had people that were moving in, and as they occupied those seats, and other people who lived in that attendance area then went to enroll. The school was overcrowded, and so we looked at that collectively as a board and administrative team, and the board made the determination that voluntary transfers would become an annual application as opposed to a one-time application per grade level. So that'd just be one example of how that's a local control issue that the board has the ability to make that determination on.
Oh,
One other-
Would there,
Sorry.
wanna go?
I was just going to say one other thing to consider before you guys make a motion on anything or wherever you go. It says, and I didn't catch this till tonight, but it says motion to open enrollment voluntary transfers for all secondary schools. I would just consider our junior highs in a little bit different situation than our high schools too, with numbers at Southeast and Northwest and North Central look a little bit different than the capacity we will have some additional room for at the high school level. So you might want to tease that out in however you proceed here tonight with the junior high piece, maybe potentially separate than the high school piece, just because that's in a little bit different scenario right now.
Again, I'm understanding this to be just lifting this specific prohibition that was put on for these three schools, but that.
Well,
it would
I
all
think the
still
way
be
this is
subject
written,
to
it would
capacity.
lift it for all secondary schools, and I'm not sure you'd want to lift that for Southeast right now.
Well, but I'm saying, I
Right.
mean, even if we lifted this, the regular rule that you can't transfer in if there's no capacity would still apply. Right. I'm seeing those as two separate things.
Absolutely.
Anyhow, I'm sorry, Latasha.
So I think my question is, before we vote on anything, is to really be able to figure out when we do this, if we are looking for, if our community has a specific goal about the diversity of our schools, I think we should really be able to get some kind of percentage points one way or the other so that we kind of know, is it a 10% change? Is it a 5% change before we just lift things? Because then I think it makes sense for us to do a little bit more digging and understanding what it is that we're lifting before we just lift it. Because this could really put us in a tailspin a little bit if we're not clear about all the people that are moving to and fro and all around the district. It'll just kind of put us back in the same situation that we're currently in. So just some food for thought that we really think about if there's an interest in having that level of diversity, that when we lift this, is it 10% change? Is it 20%? You know, I don't know what that is, so I'm just putting it out there.
That's a great question, and actually that's something that the board looked at, and I'll apologize, Chris and Brian, I'm not sure if you were on the board at that point in time, but that's something that the board looked at. It might be 3 or 4 years ago, so I think it might be before your time. There are districts in Iowa that have open enrollment provisions that stipulate what happens when you move in and out of the district and whether or not that changes the percentage of students in various demographic categories inside the school. And if that does, then they are able to prohibit you moving in or out. Those are long-standing policies in those districts and were allowed at the time they were enacted. Since that point in time, the state of Iowa has rescinded that as an option for school districts, so you actually don't have the option to say that whether a student moves in or out, changing the demographic profile of the school is a valid reason for denying that. So we can certainly monitor it. We could look at it internally. We could write rules that say, as you come in as an open enrollment student, our placement is based on those types of things. But if there's space at that particular grade level, and remember, they're not looking at it and saying, is there space at City or West per se? They're saying, is there space at the ninth grade level, 10th grade level, et cetera, that grade band. And so you couldn't deny them the ability to open enroll in, but we would retain a placement right, and we could write rules for that that dictate how we go about doing that placement.
So is that a part of our policy and governance that we would need to?
Yes,
Okay.
You're talking about open enrollment right there, though.
Correct.
The voluntary transfer, could you do it?
you sure could. Yeah.
Another issue is, I raised earlier some possible exceptions to the rule for certain specific situations. So, for example, some of the North Lincoln or Lincoln kids who chose to enroll at Southeast because they knew they were destined to City, maybe we could accommodate them. It's a small number of people and let them just finish up at City, even though they otherwise would be at Liberty. Strictly speaking, if you took this literally, they would not be allowed to transfer out of Liberty unless we make an exception. So, I mean, this is a different thing, I think, but I wouldn't want to leave some of those other issues unexamined eventually.
And that would be akin to back in 2009-10, when the board initially made the determination to send students from Lincoln up through the City High matriculation pattern. One of the things that they charged the administrative team with doing was reviewing those students who were already in the pipeline, so to speak. And so we had some engagement meetings with those students and their parents, and from that came the determination to allow students who had older siblings that were already in the Northwest pipeline to stay with them, provided that there was always a student in school together type of thing. And so that we created that bootstrapping system at that point in time. So that would have been an administrative guideline based on a recommendation from the board when the policy was adopted. So they didn't adopt the language to do that, but they gave us direction to do that.
So I hear what Director Deloach is saying about changes in if an influx or exodus of students created significant changes in various student populations, especially the ones that we've already specified in some of our board policies and board statements. I am concerned about capacity only being a determinant of placement. And I think that when we go through our superintendent directions related to the weighted resource allocation model and our statements about low SES, ELL, special ed, I think that it's important that those considerations are made, because we've gone to great lengths to include that as part of our conversation with the community and our process throughout 2014 and into 15. So I think that we need to definitely focus on whether it's significant changes plus or minus by students moving out or moving in. I think that we need to have our superintendent directions reflective of those. Again, we have those aspirational goals, and I think it's 3J5, right?
3J5, 3J6.
3J6 is the weighted resource. That's the
Right.
Yeah. You'd think I'd know this by now. I get those two mixed up all the time. But I think that having it, when I look at the PDF the first link that's attached to this agenda item, and in red, it talks about capacity. I just want to make sure that we're looking at more than just capacity. So that's.
At the same time, it does seem a little bit problematic to say, we got 100 open seats at City. If you're a non-FRL kid, you can take them. But if you're an FRL kid, well, that's going to throw the balance off. I mean, is that what we'd be talking about?
Well, and I think that's getting into the details. I think what I hear Steve talking about is that this is an action. What I would suggest is that we separate the open enrollment and the voluntary transfer question.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe we vote on just open enrollment, out of district transfers into the district, and then the voluntary transfer is a different topic that we could discuss in a work session or something, if we have some specific ideas. And because I perceive that that's something that requires a lot more discussion. I would feel uncomfortable making decisions right now about voluntary transfer right here at the table without more community feedback and things.
Well, in the,
When would you need to know about open enrollment? Like if we were going to say, yeah, it's open again,
The deadline is March 1st.
well, I'm still
So
even on that then.
we would want to give parents adequate time to make
So you're
that
going to make it
determination.
know before Christmas.
Yeah, parents need to know, because they're obviously making those determinations well before that. We have parents that miss the March 1st deadline, so they're already planning for next year. So I would argue that the sooner we know that, the quicker we can get it up on the website and advertise that for people who might be considering it. And especially due to our current upside-down process on it, I think the sooner we can advertise it, not that we're recruiting, but the sooner we can make that known.
Now, I want to let the discussion go, because this is where we're going to end up having the discussion anyway. But again, the only thing I was going to say in the beginning too was, and we've hit this, but there really is already an administrative process. And there will continue to be an administrative process
On voluntary transfer, you mean?
on,
Yeah.
on voluntary transfer. And, well, in open enrollment, how it would work when people come in and where there's capacity and all that good stuff. I think that will continue to exist. The question here is, do we get the board out of the way? I view this as, do we get the board out of the way from prohibiting some of the options? And then I'm fully aligned if we want to work on voluntary transfer guidelines, or let's go do that. But this is a simple motion. Maybe it's the catalyst, maybe it's the start of the process, just to get the board back out of the process. At least with respect to West City and Southeast. Now, keep in mind, there's nothing stopping Liberty, so we haven't taken any action on Liberty. So some people I've heard are concerned about a flight to Liberty. Well, based on today, there's nothing that's stopping that. But, I guess my view is I would like to give people of the district the option. I think the vast majority of people will go where they're assigned, and we'll get through this change process, and people will get realigned with their schools, and it'll all be fine. But if there's people that are like absolutely passionate and they're willing to do what it takes to meet the voluntary transfer guidelines, I don't know why we don't allow them that option.
Right.
There's capacity and.
right. And another thing on that I have trouble with is, if I understand it correctly, when you do the voluntary transfer, it's on a year-by-year basis?
It is now, yes, that's correct.
If someone, like the example we had earlier, they're on the path to go to City High, you'd hate to have them get in there 1 year and then the next year they're ousted because of capacity issues or something like that. I think once someone got on a track with one of the schools, they should be allowed to stay on that track.
The hard part about that is we have some schools in the district that have a lot of voluntary transfers in, and they wind up in some cases with significantly overcrowded classrooms. The people who are residents in that attendance area have expressed concerns to us that their classes are overcrowded because they have students who are not residents of that attendance area in their classrooms. And that if they had the students who are resident in their attendance area in their classroom, they would have adequate and appropriate class sizes. And so that was part of the input that we brought forward to the board when the board made the determination to move to an annual basis.
Now,
So
I'll tell you, Phil, Steve and I have debated this many times, probably over the last year, and I'm open to something like maybe every 2 years, or, and you'd have to simplify that, like maybe on the even years you have to reapply or something. I'd also be open to capstoning, where you wouldn't ask a 11, 12 to leave, you wouldn't ask a grade 8 to leave, you wouldn't ask a grade 6 to leave.
And that's the current practice.
And if you did a couple of those little things, you get pretty darn close to, if I apply to high school, I might.
You could also treat secondary different than elementary.
That's
7-year
correct.
commitment's a little bigger than a.
Elementary is a bigger challenge, because if
Correct.
you let a kindergartner in, you can't guarantee the next 7 years. You just can't do it. It's just, there's too much change. But, junior high is pretty easy. High school's a little easier.
Junior high is essentially a guarantee because you get in as a seventh grader, you have a capstone process to get in there as a high schooler. you get in as a freshman, we might have to re-examine it as a sophomore, but provided that you're in there as a freshman, the likelihood is we've looked far enough ahead that we haven't granted that if there isn't space the second year.
That's what I was gonna
And then
say,
you're
the
capstoned
yeah.
in. So at the secondary level, we essentially are already treating that a little bit differently because it's a 2-year and a 4-year window. It's really the elementary that we had the concerns with that were brought to us about overcrowding in the classrooms, and that 7-year guarantee.
Yeah, it's
President
like at
Lynch.
the high school level, you just have to be a little bit, if you're looking ahead 3 years, you just got to be a little stingier at the outset with handing them out, but then,
Correct.
you can kind of anticipate what you're getting yourself into.
I think you identified the fundamental issue, though, we do need solved, is are we allowing students to voluntary transfer into Liberty? I think that's the question that prompted this to end up on your agenda. Because like you said, there's a void in any kind of conversation about that right now, or any documented piece, because we have that City and West are closed to transfers, but without any clear guidance on what to do with Liberty. So I think that's the reason we started having the conversation. So I think just for planning on purposes of Liberty and starting to ask families to look at that scenario, that's the question that probably does need to be answered one way or another, is are we allowing students to voluntarily transfer into Liberty in the fall of 17?
In anticipated numbers, what's the argument against allowing people to transfer into Liberty?
It's similar to what we outlaid there for you on the con side of voluntary transfers. I think that's if you walk through those bullet points there, Chris, that would be the arguments against it. There'd also be arguments for it.
The argument for singling Liberty out as the school that you can't transfer into.
That you can or you can't?
That you can't. I mean, if we were going to make a special rule saying, well, but Liberty you can't transfer into, is there some reason to treat Liberty differently than the other ones?
I think the question was raised because there was capacity at Liberty, right? So,
but that's the rule anyways,
right.
If we anticipate no capacity.
So I think the strongest argument against why you wouldn't potentially allow it at Liberty is for the boundary purpose, right? I mean, so if there's designated boundaries, then are you going to allow students from City or West to, transfer into Liberty and attend there that first year? For us, it really just makes planning difficult if we don't know. We don't know how many students are attending then, so it's hard to staff a building, create a schedule, all of those pieces. So that's why we're asking to get that question in.
So is that particular to Liberty just because, it's Liberty's first year, we have no history of what to expect as far as transfers? As opposed to, people could transfer into the city, you don't know in advance how many are going to do it, but it's just, you don't expect it as much.
Right, I think we just don't know what to expect. I mean, I presume there'd be some families that would take advantage of it if they were allowed that option.
So Steve, one thing you said when you grant, or maybe I misunderstood, but when you grant someone the option to go to, let's just say City High as a freshman, you're looking forward to see if they're going to be there as a senior. So if we open up Liberty and you have voluntary transfers into that, will you be projecting out that this school is going to be full? And would that be a decision if you would deny that transfer then?
Again, one of the pluses of a growing district is, for the most part, we're growing like a triangle, and that is that our lower grade levels have more students than our upper grade levels. And so one of the things that allows us to do looking forward is at the secondary level is to have a fairly high degree of certainty that the class preceding yours is smaller than the one that you're in right now, and that's been fairly consistent since I've been here. And so we can presume that if we can accommodate you at this grade level, that we'll be able to move you through the system, because we can make those projections as we move through from a staffing standpoint. And we have the ability to accommodate that, provided that there's enough room in the building. So we're looking at it really from a future capacity standpoint. So at Liberty, we know that there's a third phase that's coming on. So we've got phase 2 in 19, phase 3 in 21. So we're looking at the current capacity, the expanded capacity with the additional 500 students there. We would use that as part of our decision-making criteria at that point.
But you might be in a position where you'd like to have some transfers there for the first year or two, but then you're going to wish they weren't there.
Well, and that's why we would be
And then a few years later, you're going to, maybe there's room for them.
Right, that's exactly right. So we'd have to be very judicious about that.
I'll just be clear, and this, I have very low fear about all the concerns, because maybe I'm a free market person, but I just think we should give parents and students the option, and if there's capacity at the school and they want to go there based on the voluntary transfer guidelines, which are kind of stacked to keep people at their home school today, then let them go. And I just don't think that many, I got to tell you honestly, I just don't think that many people are going to voluntarily transfer. So I get it, there's a lot of fear because there's uncertainty, but I just I think you gotta let it play out, and then we'll adjust if it goes too far in any
So
single
Chris,
direction.
what would be the harm in waiting to have a full 4 classes in there?
Well, why wait? We got families, we have had lots of families, we've had lots of students here saying, give me the option if it's available. So I'll just ask the reverse question. I mean, why not give them the option if it's open? Now, if, you know, if City and West are still over capacity and there's no room, then you got the rationale. But it's not us as a board saying, I'm just closing it because I'm worried about, you know, some of the various dynamics. I would go the other way, open it up, and then if we want, if we want to work superintendent directions or work the administrative guidelines, let's work that between now and December and make sure we're all happy with it. But I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it should be board directive to close the schools when there's capacity there, and if parents and students want to go there, let them go there.
I can
And all we're
I can
doing-
kind of see the argument on both sides. I guess, you know, there's some argument for waiting to see what happens with the bond. Because if it's just going to be a 1,000-kid school for longer than we're expecting, then you got,
Well, then
I
there
mean,
should be-
hopefully it won't get to that point, but
Again, then there should be board action the other way to close Liberty. So again, given the current direction, only West and City are closed, only Southeast is closed, and then we're following the administrative guidelines that are, the links are in the packet.
Again, I just want to reiterate, to some extent, it comes back to me thinking about a student living anywhere in the district, knowing that when Liberty opens, West is going to have some seats, Liberty is going to have some seats. And I too, you know, boy, I'm torn on this. I can definitely see both sides. So with the, you know, the argument about our aspirational goals in 3J5 and 3J6, I just want to go back and say I'm not sure that a student residing outside of the ICCSD should have more options than a student residing within the ICCSD.
But they don't.
Right. I'm actually saying that would be an argument to just open it up and see what happens.
Sure,
Right.
right.
But then the flip side regarding the aspirational goals in J5 and J6.
Well, that's the problem you get into. If we open enrollment, a lot of people come outside, they could have options that voluntary transfers don't.
Right.
And it's always been a
yeah.
principle.
I mean, I agree, but at the same time, I would say open enrollment's easy. We know how to do it. We could do it tonight if we wanted to. Maybe this other one needs a little more discussion, but I mean, the theory would be we would eventually act on that also, one way or another. It just seems like there's a little bit more to think about and talk about on that one.
But the only thing I'll caution you with waiting is, you know, we are going to start going to families here in the fall, and we have to build a master schedule by January to staff Liberty. So if we're going to talk about voluntary transfers on into the early winter, late winter, and then make a decision on that, or whatever that time frame is, it just becomes more and more difficult to effectively know how to plan for that building if this question's still lingering out there. Maybe, like President Lynch said, it's not a sizable amount and it doesn't shift things, but if the potential is there to shift a lot, it just kind of makes it a lot more challenging. So that's the one fear I guess I would kind of present to you by waiting on dealing with it one way or another.
We could act, we could be too slow, right? But that doesn't mean we have to act tonight on the voluntary transfers. I mean,
Yeah, just from a timeline standpoint, again, one of the things that you'll see in their recommendation piece that they shared, which I would agree with, is we need to consider that March 1st deadline, both for the state statutory requirement for open enrollment, but also for our voluntary transfers. We do registration with kids much earlier than that, so your high school students are registering for classes earlier than that, and hopefully parents will have already gone through that determination process that they would like to do the open enrollment, they'd like to do the voluntary transfer, they've submitted the paperwork, they've registered, because then we use that information for staffing, for setting up the FTE at the school and then doing the allocation within the departments. So when students either open enroll at the end of the process, just before March 1st, or they were to voluntary transfer right before the end of the process, our high school administrative and counseling teams are then going back in trying to rebuild some of that. So I would definitely encourage us to have a voluntary transfer date no later than the open enrollment deadline of March 1st. You could set it earlier, but certainly no later than.
And Matt, what would be helpful in terms of Liberty planning? When would you like to know this question?
I think ideally, we wanted to know by the end of September what our numbers were, fairly solid numbers for Liberty High. We really felt like at the end of September, if we knew what Liberty High was going to look like, we can effectively plan this out. You know, the transfer piece adds to some of that with what you're all discussing with the boundaries and the amount of students that will attend there. So the sooner the better for us. I mean, I think it's hard to predict how many transfers we'll get, you know, not just opening the school and that. If that's the way we go, then that'll create a little bit of a moving target as we move through. My goal would be end of September, we know exactly how many students are going to be in Liberty next fall, so we can plan for that effectively.
That would include any kind of, again, these sort of little particular transition exceptions that I was proposing earlier. You'd want to know about that stuff too, either yes or no.
Right.
You'd want to know ASAP.
I mean, there's also nothing that would prevent us from, I mean, if you took an approach of, you know, at some point you were going to consider voluntary transfers and, you know, you build in a process for what that looks like, or if you want us to come back with what a potential process for voluntary transfers looks like and how we handle those and deal with that. If there's factors you want built into the model, I think we could definitely come back with all of that. The lingering piece out there that just makes me nervous is the one I've already stated, that we don't answer the question and there's still the possibility you're going to allow them. I think if we're going to allow them, if that's the board's direction, then we should just be open about the fact we're going to allow them, and then we'll try to get a better handle on how many we're going to be dealing with. If we're not going to allow them, we can certainly come back. If we're not going to allow them at all, if we're not going to allow them for a while, we can come back with a process of what it might potentially look like. But to have the question unanswered is probably the worst case scenario, in my opinion.
Place this on a work session agenda for September, so we could have a decision to Matt on the question of Liberty in particular.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea, because it seems to me that we probably have a consensus that whatever we do with voluntary transfers is not going to look like this. But the details of it need to be worked out, and it's one of these things that I just feel like in public, you know, hearing some things, you know, we might be not thinking some things that maybe we should do differently, and a little bit of time for input on what it should be, even if it's just one meeting. Something good could come out of that. The open enrollment part seems easy.
Yeah, my preference would be to open it up tonight and then go do the work to define a process to, if we want to restrict it or close it. I mean, it's a chicken and the egg a little bit.
And then we can give Matt more specifics by the end of
Well-
September for Liberty in particular.
And then you get a whole bunch of, you know, we'll get some press on, we open it up, and then you'll start to get interest, right? I mean, otherwise, we're going to be in the dark on whether this is a big interest thing or not.
So Chris, we could also go the other way though, and we could decide to open enrollment, keep the City West and Liberty closed for voluntary transfers. Then we could discuss that in a work session, and if we decided to open that up in a future time, we could do that. But for planning wise, would that help?
But the status quo is not that Liberty is closed. It's just that City and West are closed.
For voluntary transfers is what I said.
For voluntary transfers.
Yeah,
though.
open enrollment would be open to any school that had space. But voluntary transfers would be closed at City, West, and Liberty.
We'd have to do something to close them at Liberty, because right now they're not closed at Liberty.
Correct.
Right.
So just not acting on voluntary transfers would actually not do that. We'd have to do a little bit more.
Right, what I'm
if that's
saying
what you
is,
want.
if we open enrollment and closed voluntary transfers at the high school level, right? And then decided we were going to talk this at the work session, and in the future, we would open up voluntary transfers again.
Like within a month or two, just to
Correct.
get settled.
Yes.
One of those things, I'm afraid. Seems like we're making a decision and changing it, you know, and I know I'm not against that, but people complain. If we think we're going to think it through and we don't know exactly what we're going to do on voluntary transfers, I would say let's just put it on a meeting.
So why don't we talk this in agenda setting, we can put on, the work session for the 13th is pretty full, but maybe we can prioritize it.
But I'd be willing to make a motion right now to open enrollment.
Then go for it.
I'd like to move that we reopen open enrollment.
Second.
Can we
I
just,
need to be more specific.
Can we clarify, is this high
To-
school
to-
or is this junior high? Is this
To
all
lift
secondary
our-
schools?
Lift our previous policy, oh geez.
I think it only
That's where you get the
specified
junior high
secondary
problem.
before, did it
Yeah.
not?
Chris, may I
We were only
suggest,
closed to
Yeah, that's
secondary,
both of them
open
together.
enrollment, so we're just undoing secondary.
So really, the motion would be to rescind the.
well, could I just suggest that the motion is to reopen open enrollment for all secondary schools.
All secondary schools
For the 17-18 school year.
for the 17-18 school year,
And that's based on if there's capacity.
but that will be subject to
Right.
capacity anyway.
So-
The default is capacity, so for junior high on open enrollment, we have capacity at Northwest. So we could get a junior high open enrollment application. They may ask for Southeast, we may not be able to grant
That's
it to
correct.
Southeast, but we could give it to Northwest, so.
Northwest or North Central.
So there was a motion and a second. Would you like to restate the motion?
State the
Kim's head is
motion.
Okay,
spinning.
let's just make it 100% clear. So this is a motion to reopen open enrollment into all secondary schools as of 2017-18, under whatever the usual limitations are.
Got that, Kim?
Second.
Very good. Further discussion? All right, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
And now are we aligning to put voluntary transfer on the 13th work session?
Sure.
Okay.
And then maybe the 26th agenda or whatever the second meeting is, maybe, depending how it goes.
And I don't know if I need to discuss this here or with agenda setting, but could we ask administration to come back with some recommendations or some scenarios of how they see things playing out if we take certain actions?
Yeah, we could certainly do that. I could even bring some examples from other districts and how they handle that with multiple high schools and that scenario as well. So we could certainly prepare some just options that are out there or potential things to consider.
All right, board, anything else on this one? Steve, anything? Matt? All right, very good. Next item on the agenda is the work session report out, at least the portion on secondary transportation. So just wanted to let the public know at our last work session on July 26th, the board requested administration commission a secondary transportation committee. And there's really three objectives. One is to study the impact on attendance at the secondary level due to barriers to transportation. Kind of a sub-question to that was, do our students use public transit today? Second was, is there an impact to participation in before and after school offerings at the secondary level due to barriers to transportation? So there's a typo in there, it should be barriers to transportation. And then the third question was a little more open-ended. What are the barriers, if any? And we know there are barriers, but what are the barriers to participation in before and after school offerings, again, at the secondary level? We asked the committee to reapply the process that our elementary transportation committee looked at last year, which was outstanding. And just like the timeline last year, we asked them to report back by January, February with a final update, and then they will request either work session or board agenda time as they need it. So really just want to report out on that so people know it's in motion, and I think we're all excited about that committee getting kicked off and getting back and seeing what the outcomes are. Further discussion on that one? All right, next item on the agenda, start of school update. Steve?
Quick update for you as we get ready for the year. First of all those students start tomorrow. We had a great week last week. We had 88 new teachers in last Tuesday and Wednesday for their orientation. This room was packed. A lot of enthusiasm. We've got a mix of teachers that are new to the profession and those that are arriving here with experience. We have that conversation with them each year about Iowa City being a destination school district, and I think that's clearly shown by the experienced teachers that choose to move here mid-career. So they had 2 great days working collectively to better understand what's expected of them here in the district and getting them up to speed so that they are ready to go. Prior to that, we welcomed in new administrators, and thanks to those of you that were here earlier tonight, we had a short reception for them. We've got 10 new to the district administrators. We also have 12 administrators that are shifting seats within the district. So we had them in the week prior to that, getting them up to speed. Again, last week, and I think this is a real testament to the work that's going on with our curriculum and instruction team. We have an optional professional development day that happened last Thursday, and we had over 800 teachers participate in it. We actually used the auditorium at West in the morning, and based on the RSVPs, we thought we'd be okay. We were a little overcrowded at West in the auditorium, and that was a really good thing. We had a wonderful speaker to start the day. Our focus in the morning was on closing the gap with our English language learner students, and it was a time well spent with a focus on moving these programs forward. So that was a great optional day on Thursday, and on Friday we welcomed all of our teachers back. Thanks to those of you that were able to make it to our convocation out at the Marriott. Great celebration, wonderful opportunity to thank the teachers, and it's the one day of the year where we get to get our entire staff together. So that was culminated with a keynote speech from Jan Jensen, the women's basketball coach at Iowa. Great message, parent in the district, talked about growing up in Iowa and tying it to her work on the team, and I think that really resonated with our staff. Yesterday evening, we got a chance to cut a ribbon at Coralville Central. One of the things that was exciting about that was conversation with staff about the fact that that building is now air-conditioned, which is a wonderful thing. We maintain a set of remote thermometers that help us keep control of hot spots in the district when the weather is particularly challenging for us. And for those of you that know Coralville Central, upstairs in the 6th grade wing was probably one of the worst places in the district. I tell people it was like going to the airport. You'd walk into those classrooms, they had so many fans running in there. I was worried about the electrical load on the system, but now they've got lots of extra space in their rooms, and it's nice and cool, and the building looked absolutely fantastic. This year, we will actually start with 77% of the district air-conditioned. We only have 4 elementary schools now that do not have 100% air conditioning. So, and maybe more importantly, when you look at that, those 4 schools are all slated to receive air conditioning by 2019. So we are well on our way to having fully operational HVAC systems in all of our elementary schools, which is going to be a wonderful thing for our kids. Still a little bit of a challenge at the high school level, so those of you with high school kids up on the 3rd floor at City and West, it's still going to be a little warm up there when the school year starts, but fortunately those kids and staff get to rotate out of those classrooms throughout the day. So we're really excited about that. A couple of other things to highlight and remind people of. This is the 2nd year of our new start date. We certainly acknowledge the governor for making a compromise and setting August 23rd as our official start date, so tomorrow, August 24th, is the day that our calendar committee picked. This is the first year with our new bell times. So we've been working to make sure that students and parents are ready to go. We thank the board and the community for their engagement process last year. A question was asked by the news media yesterday, why the later start for the secondary students, and I was able to reiterate the research that was done by that team regarding adolescent sleep patterns and their circadian rhythms, and we are hopeful that our new schedule will ensure that students that arrive for first period are awake and ready to go. Our elementary kids, we know for the most part, are already up, so we're going to start them early tomorrow morning, so we're looking forward to that 7:55 bell time, and maybe most importantly, as part of that process, I've been watching the weather like crazy for the last couple of weeks, and it's looking like we're going to have a good first 3 days for school. And my last reminder to parents that are watching out in the community is that our first 3 days run on an early out schedule. So the students will be out an hour early on their regular Thursday schedule for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we are really looking forward to it. Students and staff that I've had the opportunity to interact with are very enthusiastic and ready to go. Any questions I can answer for you?
Great, just on what you already brought up, I just wanted to thank our staff at Coralville Central for doing a great job over the last year and working through the construction, and I just want to say it was a great event, Kristen. I think the ribbon cutting and just an unbelievable excitement there. I found it funny that the new wing at Coralville Central was built in 1958, right? So that's always kind of interesting when our language is, the new wing was like...
All relative.
It's all relative. And it's just great to hear the air conditioning number. I know that's definitely going to have an impact in the hot months, so that's outstanding. So Steve, can you talk a little bit about class sizes? And we've
Sure.
had a few emails and how your staff,
Yep.
looks at it as school day approaches, and then how we think about it between on Labor Day and just that whole process.
So if you'll remember last year in April and May, the board had several lengthy discussions about how we allocate resources among our schools, and we had, Brian referenced it earlier, a big discussion about Directive 3J6, which talks about aspirational class sizes. As part of that dialogue, the board made the determination that we are going to reallocate resources within the district to better serve schools that have high barriers to achievement. In particular, we have 6 schools, Twain, Hills, Wood, Alexander, Kirkwood, and Lucas, that have the highest barriers to achievement in the district, and that we would do our best to reach some lower aspirational class sizes in those 6 schools. The aspirational class sizes that the board put forward at that time were 20 in the grades kindergarten, first and second, and 26 in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. They maintained the same aspirational class size that we had before for those schools that fall in the middle of those assessments about barriers to learning, and that is K2, an aspirational size of 24, and at grades 3 to 6, an aspirational size of 28. And then the board looked and said for those schools that have fewer barriers to learning, that we would look at an increase in that aspirational class size. And so you see those numbers going up to 26 in grades K1 and 2 for those schools, and up to 30 in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so that resulted in a shift of some teachers from our lower barriers to achievement school to the higher barriers to achievement school. We do have the good fortune of being a district that is growing in enrollment, so as we looked at adding staff at the elementary level, we targeted those additions at those high-need schools. By doing that, we've been able to reduce the overall per-pupil ratio in those districts, or in those attendance areas, those 6, to 20 to 1 or less overall, and slightly lower at the K2 level. We were able to maintain in our mid-range schools, we were able to maintain approximately a 22 to 1 ratio in those schools. And then as you move into our schools with fewer barriers to learning, you see that average across the school in the 23 to 24 range for the most part. So slight redistribution of resources with the intent to provide smaller class sizes and hopefully a greater attention to those students with learning gaps.
Just one question on this. Looking it over, I mean, the numbers look, I'm fairly comfortable with most of those numbers, just looking at them as numbers, with one exception, and that's the Mann Kindergarten.
We have, Amy's not here this evening. She's got a commitment with her kids who are going back to school today. But we have actually, beyond the Mann Kindergarten, we have about 7 individual classrooms or grade levels that we're looking at schools. One of the things that you see here is you see all of the students that are in our Power School system. For those of you that are parents, you go through the e-registration process. So we still do have some grade levels where there are a large number of students who have not completed the e-registration process. So we've been working very hard with the principals and the support staff and the student family advocates in those buildings to get that done. And some of the numbers that you see that are in the because that's conditionally formatted, the numbers that are orange and red are the hot spots that we're still watching at grade levels and in schools throughout the district. And in many cases, those are schools where we're still waiting for those e-registration numbers to come in. So we'll be looking at that tomorrow morning, and if indeed those kids are showing up, we'll have the opportunity to make some adjustments in those classes. That's been past practice in the district. They've usually waited a little bit later. We're going to try to move a little bit quicker on that. I can tell you that over the past few years, our elementary principals have done an amazing job at getting students and their parents through that e-registration process. So we are starting the year, we have started the year each year for the last few years, better equipped to deal with the kids that are walking through the door. But we still do have a few classes out there that we're going to be following those e-registrations and then the actual walk-ins tomorrow. And we may have to make some adjustments as we move through this first week.
When you say make adjustments, are you going to have to pull somebody out of one place and put them in another, or do you sort of hold back a little bit so that you can?
Probably not move teachers right now. We went through literally with a fine-tooth comb this afternoon, and there's really only 3 grade levels that look like we could pull a teacher out. However, at this point in time, and knowing the level of mobility that we have in the district, and also the fact that several of our neighboring states have Labor Day start dates, and so that has often resulted in kids showing up late for school here as their parents move into the district and don't know about the early start date. We're probably not going to pull from those because they're right on the edge. So the likelihood is you might see, and in particular, I believe you referenced the man kindergarten there. Right now there's a 1.0 in there. You can see that in some of the areas we've got 0.5 FTEs in there. That allows us to ensure that we've got smaller class sizes at literacy and math. So you may see something like that happening with the man kindergarten.
But if you were to add 0.5 to the man kindergarten, where are you getting that 0.5? You know
We're
what I'm
out
saying?
hiring for that.
You're hiring, so it's not like you're subtracting from someone else's
No,
number.
not at this point in time.
And at what point do you think of that as being done? You know, I mean, okay, you know, we're done with any kind of adding or moving that we're going to do.
In the past, it's been as late as the 1st of October. We've gotten much better at it, and I would say that that'll be done within probably the first 8 days, so by the end of that second week of school.
And that's the process I was talking about. I mean, the weeks leading up, it's a very dynamic time, right?
It is.
I think everybody kind of gets it conceptually, but then when it's your classroom, you're wondering what the heck's going on. But you guys are looking at the numbers daily, weekly, you're doing a check tomorrow. So you're hoping by the end of August, first week of September.
Yes. Yeah.
And like you said, we're trying to be more responsive than in the past and make quicker moves. And that, you know, you've made a number of adjustments already.
As a matter of fact, we just added 3.0 FTE yesterday and today to plug some gaps that we saw in here. We're up right now. One of the things that we've always looked at is the attrition rate. That is, if we've got X number of kids in Power School today, how many do we think will survive and be here on the first day of school? There's several things that we've done in the past few years that have significantly changed our accuracy. One is summer registration. We used to, you moved to town and you waited until the beginning of August to go in and register your students. We now do registration during the summer, so there's not this huge influx of numbers that all of a sudden show up in August and that we didn't anticipate. So we're better able to build those in, and that allows us to make some of those changes over the course of the summer. And then really about the beginning of August, from a flexible and fluid standpoint, we're getting in there and looking at those numbers on a daily basis and making the adjustments that we need. One of the things that's hard is to make those adjustments, and that goes back to Chris's question. It's hard to do that after you've assigned homerooms, students have been assigned, teachers are in buildings, they're getting their classroom ready. So our goal is to try to be as close as we can to where we need to be when they start making those announcements for staff and students.
Just so I understand, I'm reading the chart correctly. So if, for example, it says there's 76 students and there's 3.5 sections, that basically means there's 3 sections in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, or vice versa?
No, that's a great question. So one of the things that we know, and of course it's right in line with the board's strategic goals, is how important it is to ensure that we've got appropriate class sizes for literacy and math. So if you saw 75 kids and you saw 3.5 sections, there'd be 3 homerooms of 25 students each. But when those students go to literacy, there'd be another half-time teacher that would be working with the students during their literacy and their math block. So rather than being broken into 3 classrooms for literacy and math, they'd actually be broken into 4 classrooms. So that would take them from a 25-to-1 ratio down to an 18-to-1 ratio for their literacy and the math. Now when they're back in science and social studies, they'd be back at those groups of 25.
Okay. When we see, you know, that report that comes through in October and it shows you the actual numbers in each section, it's not always 25, 25, 25. Sometimes it's 24, 23, 27.
Yes.
How is that going to appear? How is that 0.5 going to be visible on that chart?
You won't see that as a homeroom number, simply because that 0.5
Homeroom's on the
FTE
chart.
doesn't have a homeroom. That teacher is dedicated to the literacy and math instruction at that particular grade level in that school. So you wouldn't see that on that chart because those would be homerooms that are assigned in that individual school at that grade level.
And at the high school level, it sounds like we're happy that we're building Liberty right
We're
now.
up right now, I'll be perfectly honest with you. The attrition that we usually expect to see as people go through that e-registration has not happened. We're at 2150 approximately at West and 1750 at City High. So we're up at both schools. We are full. I think I saw them here earlier, but they might have left. Our high school principals were here. So if any of you have kids at West, You know that there's a locker crunch going on right now because there are more students than there are lockers in the school. Matt's working with them right
They
now.
got it fixed right at the end of the day. Everybody's got a locker.
Everybody's got a locker. Wonderful. I was trying to make my kids double up to make an extra locker over there at West. But one of the things that is hard to do at the secondary level is to add FTE. It's a lot easier to do it at the elementary level. We look at these numbers. Kindergarten, for instance, if we needed to add another section, we could add another section by simply dividing those kids in half. When you get to the secondary level, that staffing is a lot more comprehensive in terms of, and complicated in terms of the number of sections that kids have. So it's not like you can just add another math teacher, add another math section. You've really got to look at individual sections and say, is that a section of Spanish or biology or math that I could break into two and make more reasonable? So Matt's been working with them for the past couple weeks. He's been able to add a couple of, at the junior high level, it's a .17 to get a section. At the high school, it's a .19. To get that extra teacher in there. And so they've made a few of those additions at the secondary level, but that really goes back to our first conversation. That we do in the spring, and once that schedule is baked in and once those kids have gone through and registered for those classes and we start building the master schedule for them, it gets harder and harder for us to add FTE. So we'll hold a little that we can use at the elementary level. At the secondary level, we're pumping them all into the system right away in the spring and then building those sections for them.
Just one question about Southeast, maybe Matt or Steve can answer. Numbers obviously are very up there and over capacity, and I'm just curious what the plan or what the trigger point or what you're watching there to help that situation.
Yeah, we are over capacity at Southeast right now. So our big thing is, first of all, make sure the class sizes are appropriate for the kids that are there. One of the things that we used to have the option to do, but we're running out of them, was we used to have a few extra of those single classroom modulars. Got 4 left, Dwayne says over there, that we purchased from the university. So we keep an eye on that. Obviously, if we can keep them inside the building, we prefer to do that, but they're getting awful close right now.
If suddenly 6 modulars appeared on the southeast site, how would you take advantage of them? You've already got all the students assigned to their
right, but
sections.
what you might find, though, is that we're using classrooms inside that we're moving study halls, we're moving other kinds of programs like that are inside classrooms out so that we could offer a classroom in there. So one of the things you find at Southeast, and Matt could speak to this, is you use every space. So you're down there in the commons and it's being used sometimes for instructional purposes where we might better be positioned to have those students in a classroom, and that's one of the things that we can afford them when we put modulars on the campus. So.
Yeah, it kind of becomes an issue, with the staff and taking care of your staff, because every space is used by students every single period of the day, every minute of the day. So, staff, if they're traditionally assigned to a classroom, well, any off period they have, there's a class scheduled in there. So you're just utilizing every single space. The library could have a class not long-term scheduled into there, but, you're utilizing all of those spaces if you need to for the short-term homerooms. Some of those common times are the ones that get a little bit challenging. Lunch, serving kids for lunch gets a little bit longer, so that's where the capacity starts to stretch. We're pretty good about finding space to hold the classes, but when you start talking before school, after school, lunchtime, homeroom time periods, that's when it gets a little bit more challenging.
Going back to elementary, I have a couple questions. So obviously we're set for this year, but as I look at our really small, low FRL schools, have we looked at some grade sharing opportunities there?
We haven't. We've talked about that as a board and a community in the past, but we haven't gotten any further than that conversation piece right now. And I think if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from that standpoint, one of the things that we struggle with a little bit is we have awkward cohorts, and so you'll see a little bit of that in here. As you're looking at this, for the folks in the audience, a conditionally formatted chart, green means smaller class sizes, orange and red means larger class sizes. You would presume that as you move from left to right, everything's getting more red. And yet, when you go down and you look at some of the schools where you see some green mixed in some of the low barrier schools, that's really because there's an awkward sized cohort at that grade level. Too big to be in one or two sections, too small to be just in a single section. And so we wind up having to put another teacher in there, whereas if they were in a larger cohort, it's a little easier to break them up into those sizes that reach the aspirational goals that the board has set. So that's part of the challenge of working with those awkward cohorts.
There were some mixed grades last year, though, weren't there, in the mix?
There are, and there's a couple of places right now where they're working with that. Mann and Lincoln have been working with that. Many of you will remember, especially those who've been around for a while, that we used to do multi-grading. We struggled with that for a couple of reasons. Curricular support was a big one. There are very few curricular developers that actually work with a multi-graded format anymore, and so we were struggling to find appropriate curriculum for the kids. And the other problem was mobility. And as kids move from school to school, one of the things that we were hearing from our staff was that kids were missing large components of the curriculum or repeating them, so they might get 2 years of fifth grade social studies because they were in a 5-6 split. That school was doing fifth grade last year, this school's doing fifth grade this year, and so now they missed the entire sixth grade social studies curricula. So as we went through that process, we tried to straight grade the schools, and again, been a little bit of a challenge in some of our schools with those awkward sized cohorts.
So when you say they're working with it at Mann and Lincoln, do you mean there are some mixed grades?
They're doing some mixed grade classes as opposed to entire teams. So Julie's been pretty creative at Mann as she's working with some of her specials in particular as she's looking at those assignments. So she's still in, if you'll look at Mann right now, you'll actually see that there's 2 red cells on there, and the reason I'm not giving you a definitive on that is as of today she was still working with that as she was trying to get the rest of that e-registration done and determining where exactly she was going to put each of her staff members.
And with our lowest FRL schools also being our lowest mobility schools, my thought would be that we should look at more grade sharing in the future so that our chart doesn't end up with so much green at the end where we have the lowest barrier schools.
Sure.
And I know small class sizes are preferable everywhere, but
Yes.
it really gives the appearance of penalizing the larger schools.
How did our bus trials go as far as being on time and with the roads in disrepair in certain parts of the community?
Craig, if you've got an update for them on transportation, and for those in the audience, obviously we're struggling with some transportation challenges in North Liberty and Iowa City right now.
So, we're all out on the roads 2 days this week, and they had successful runs as far as being able to complete their routes on time. We did have to do a considerable amount of adjustments, however. And so today we actually uploaded another, we hung some more information into Power School for parents for transportation, showing some tweaked times, a pickup and drop-off times of 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. There were just too many parents to contact personally, so we decided to do that through Power School because of all of the challenges that we currently have out there right now, and the routings that we've done. So I think we have a pretty good handle on that. I asked them today. They feel very confident. They're ready to go, and we'll have a successful day tomorrow. Now, there's always a learning curve, and things always go slower the first couple of days, just like when we serve lunch or anything else. But I think we're good to go as far as transportation.
I was going to ask a similar question just about, because that's something I learned from the whole process of the bell schedule, is that there is always a period of trial and error, I guess, at the beginning of the school year with the bus routes, and maybe even after school starts. I mean, at what point do you feel like we'll be done making any adjustments we need to make? Do you feel like you're already at that point, or maybe still there could be some changes? Or
Well, we feel really good about how we have all of our students scheduled right now. Now, if they follow through with their intentions, we'll be fine as far as numbers on buses and things like that. What we find, however, is that for whatever reason, there isn't 100% follow through, and so we'll be making some adjustments as we go along. And you know, I've been asking these questions all along. How tight are we as we're scheduling these buses out? You know, we had a lot of pay-to-ride kids that we've introduced into the system this year. And you know, are we maxing our buses out? And Durham has been very good about allowing some flexibility in there. I think we have. I think we've hit a nice sweet spot right now where we were able to really show some economies by reduction in routes through you know, tiering our routes with the bell system, which worked very well. And then through the reduction in the discretionary busing that this board helped put in place last January, and we communicated out to the parents. And so through all of that process, I feel really good that we've been able to accommodate all of those students. I think we reported to you that we had 187. We're able to accommodate 185 of those students, and so that's 99%, and that's doing pretty well in all measures. So I'm not expecting big problems as far as that goes. But
Well, you know, one of the things we were hoping to change was to, by going with the 55-minute gap between things and switching the order, was that we wouldn't have those situations where kids are waiting a long time after school for their
Right.
bus to come. I mean, other than working out a few bugs maybe, does it still look like we will achieve that goal?
Absolutely. We specifically asked that question, and our students, there shouldn't be any more than about a 5-minute lag one way or the other as far as pick up or drop off according to when things are scheduled to occur. So we won't be housing kids under a supervision model like we did last year. And I know that's setting really well with a lot of folks, including our parents. So.
I have a question for you, Craig, about how rollout of pay to ride has gone. Any update on that?
Yeah, I think we've we did a pretty good job of communicating with our parents. They responded really well with that. We had a considerable amount of interest, and our parents took advantage of that. And like I said, we were able to accommodate 99% of the requests.
That was the 187. Okay.
Yeah, and so we feel really good about that. We're still getting requests, however, and just know that after the deadline, the June 15th deadline that we put on this, where we were going to route the child with the routing process and try and accommodate everyone the best we could, which we did. Now when they come in, it's do we have capacity, and is it possible for us to do that? And so we're in that process with these subsequent pay-to-ride requests right now, and we're accommodating as many of those as we can.
Thanks, sorry.
Thank you for your work you did on the pay to ride. I know that was a new concept that we had to, that we encouraged you to pursue, and I appreciate your work on that.
I think parents, from all the interactions that I was able to have with parents, it really went pretty well. Of course, there's always the little stickler about the money, and there is some involved, but we also honor, the free and reduced aspect of that too. And we had a few parents that were on a reduced price that were able to be a part of the pay-to-ride system for that reduced cost, and that was good. And as you know, you already provide discretionary busing for a great number of students on that free status, that you left that in place. And so it really kind of took care of itself. I was really quite surprised at how well it actually worked out, honestly, after all of that. I know I shouldn't have been,
No worries.
but I was skeptical to begin with, but it actually worked out pretty well.
A different topic about start of school. I guess I'm just curious if you could, now that we have a new bell schedule, and so, and it wasn't the bell schedule maybe we would have chosen if we had a few extra $1 million to play with, but now we've got the secondary students starting later and the elementary students getting out earlier, and I'm just wondering if Steve or maybe Matt or somebody can kind of give us just an overview on some of the problems we sort of worried about, like before and after school care, were we able to accommodate as many people, or, you know, were we able to provide any opportunities for people who got to high school maybe earlier than 9 o'clock? What happened with any of that?
Sure. Matt, if you want to give them an update on the 0-hour option, and then maybe also on the Kirkwood Regional Center start time for that first academy group?
Sure. So one of the, I guess, unintended benefits of a later start time, the Kirkwood Regional Center, the first academy starts at 7:30, so students that take that first academy 7:30 to 9 will only miss one period of the school day instead of potentially two that they would have missed in the past. The middle of the day option is a little bit more difficult for our secondary students to take advantage of at the regional center, but I think that John Y. and his staff recognize that Iowa City makes up a large portion of the enrollment out there, and that they shifted a lot of their resources to those morning academies so they could take advantage of our students participating in those. On our home campuses at City and West High, we have a PSEO Chinese course that's going to be taught by a University of Iowa instructor. So we're excited about that opportunity. So staffing cost neutral to us. The Confucius Institute at the university really wanted to get that off the ground. So on alternating days at City and West, we'll have that PSEO Chinese. Students can continue into that into the second semester.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Post-secondary enrollment options, so they get high school credit and college credit for that, university credit for that. So they would be able to, if they complete 1 year of that course with us, they'll be able to enter the second semester of first year Chinese at the University of Iowa. So,
Chinese.
Excuse me?
How did we settle on Chinese? Was just demand?
It was just a kind of a mutual interest. We were looking for, you know, additional languages that would be a potential interest area for our students, and then the university was vested in really working through this Confucius Institute to get something started as well. So kind of served a dual need there, dual purpose, so that was a great option for us. And then also in the 0-hour format, we'll have How College Works at West High. We'll have that offering before school as well for students that would like to do
Sorry,
that.
can you say that again? What was the name of that?
How College Works.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of a prep course for students that are maybe thinking about a regional center opportunity or a PSEO opportunity, about some of those skills they'll need to be successful through that college experience. I think that was one thing we found with some students that took courses at the regional center. They might not have went into it eyes wide open with some of the increased demands and, you know, maybe lack of that they didn't have a day-to-day teacher that were always responded to them and reaching out to them with, is your homework done, those types of things. So this How College Works better prepares them with some study skills pieces for university or college life. So we're excited about those early options. I think some concerns we potentially have at the secondary level are students showing up early and, you know, getting dropped off and not having staff on site right away to supervise that. So principals have tried to proactively address that with communications out to families, let them know when the building would be open, when staff will be on site. That'll be something we monitor, you know, the first few weeks of school here to see how we are responding to that, to make sure we're addressing that. And then, of course, you know, at the end of the day, as we talked about those bell schedules, just with students missing time for activities and those pieces and getting activities started and not running out of daylight and some things like that will be just some things we have to monitor and work through. But our athletic directors and principals have done a tremendous job of trying to anticipate what those pieces are and work through those concerns ahead of time.
Does it seem like just some stuff that used to be in the afternoon is now just going to be in the morning?
A little bit, but I mean, that kind of presents challenges of transportation, especially at like our junior high level. You know, if to move too many practices to the morning becomes problematic, and obviously we're going to study that transportation issue, but for students, we already capture them if they're at school and they've arrived at school to continue that after school scenario. To move all of those things to the morning, they'd have to get to that opportunity, so that's a little bit more problematic. There are some things that have shifted to the morning, though, just from the reality of that's when the time is free to do it and makes more sense.
Now, have our numbers at the regional center increased this year over last year?
Yeah.
Significantly?
Yeah, significantly we're up. At one time I thought maybe we'd double our numbers. I don't think we're going to quite reach that number, but actually this week we've started preparing a report to show you guys about our regional center numbers in the academies, so you guys have an update on that. But they have increased dramatically. I think now that there's a known quantity there and we're getting some reviews back on what these academies are. Oddly enough, they're a coincidence that the person that kicked off our professional learning this year, Deep Humvasai from Des Moines and their central campus, had kind of given the same review that when they opened that and had those academies there until students went and experienced and saw some of the opportunities, the numbers weren't where they are today. So we would anticipate that to continue to go up. I think our schedule will continue to help with that in those morning academies, and so students also learn of those opportunities.
Opportunity for like after-school programming as well over there with the regional center? Are they looking into that, or?
The after-school programming, not as familiar with. I know they do some independent things where they reach out to the community. I know all summer they've had groups of students in and for different camps, STEM camps, things through the University of Iowa that parents could sign up for. But I'm not as familiar any partnerships we necessarily have with them right now for after-school pieces. I know on Thursdays, just one example, they do have something out there, a kids camp where kids could sign up. It's a science and engineering type of not academy, but camp that kids can participate in on the early out days.
All right, Steve, sounds like...
One more piece of that, though, is before and after school care. I'm just wondering, did we have any problems? Are the wait lists longer? Are the
I have not.
mornings harder to staff?
I haven't had any problem shared with me yet. We have our first meeting with the directors coming up, and so we'll be bringing them in as a group to see how things are going. I know that the initial feedback from them was far fewer people signing up for before school, just because of the early start for the elementaries, and consistent numbers of folks signing up for after school. So the initial take was essentially time shifting, where they might have spent this much time with them before in a chunk like this and a chunk like this. Now it's all in the afternoon.
All right, Steve, thanks for that update, and Matt, and it sounds like an exciting year. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it's our second year of adding 50 hours of instructional time at elementary.
Yes.
A couple months from now, the new Bell schedule will be the new normal.
Yes.
The weighted resource model is very exciting. Increased air conditioning, technology's been a great increase. It's our second year with a strategic plan really taking hold, so it should be an exciting school year.
Looking forward to it.
All right, thanks for the update. Next item on the agenda is Appendix 9, Dwayne.
Thank you. We have 7 projects with 12 approvals this evening. The first one was a project that we started last May, and it was the design of a softball practice field at Van Allen that can be used by Liberty High students when they open, and North Central Junior High students, of course. And we collapsed the design, the schematic design development, and construction documents into one. Those plans are available at the physical plan. I also have a set with me tonight if you want to see it. And so I'm asking approval on that, and we also have a notice of public hearing for that project. I'm estimating the cost of that project to be less than $250,000 at this point. Still looking for a few more documents to come in. The Coralville Central, it's a step 8 change request for $30,425. We had some additional unforeseen items in ductwork and rework when we got into that older section of the building. We had some more floor prep, and we had to rework some electrical work because of the ductwork. In the district, we requested some improved equipment, heat pumps in those classrooms. The ones that were originally spec'd we felt were inadequate. So we had an $11,600 change for that. And then we had a code change, a request to move some strobe lights, and we put a flow meter on the sprinkler, which doesn't mean much to anybody, but if the flow or the pressure drops, we get an alarm, so we know that the sprinkler system may not work properly. Kirkwood, the exterior lighting project is complete, so we're asking for substantial completion and a release of the retainage of $8,532, and also a step 9 project acceptance. Here at the ESC, the chiller project we're asking for substantial completion and a release of the retainage of $8,414. And step 10 is a project acceptance of that. At Lucas, we have a small change request for $6,679.99. And part of that, $881, was code changes for some additional occupancy sensors. And we've had some unforeseen electrical work that we had to do. It was in the way of the geothermal lines that come into the building, so we had to move some of those around. Most of that was outside work. And then the district requested an upgrade in the color change on the siding panels to the color that we desired. The West High locker room, we also have a change request for $7,630. That included some code requests for electrical changes and some unforeseen and nearly $7,000 in pipe size changes. We did some additional demolition work in the coach's office some not smartboard, whiteboards, added some electrical and plumbing work. And then the last item this evening is safety and security for City High. And this is a recommendation of award of contract. We got 2 bids. First bid was $1,598,000 from Woodruff Construction. They're in Fort Dodge and Iowa City. And the second bid was $1,599,000, which is a difference of $1,000, which is almost remarkable. And so we're recommending that, and there was also an alternate, but we're going to delay that work. It was for some additional doors. So we're recommending award of contract to Woodruff Construction in the amount of $1,598,000. With that, I answer any questions you might have about these or any of the other projects.
Entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Appendix 9 approval requests and project updates.
Second.
Further discussion? Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, moving to agenda setting. Just a reminder, on Sunday, we have a board retreat. I think from an agenda standpoint, we'll delete number 1. We're going to do it like last time. The team building will be in the board goals, so there won't really be a number 1. Sorry? No. Maybe we'll do that after. Just a reminder, Harry Hickenthal's volunteered to join us again, so it was great having him last time. He just brings a lot of experience. Steve will be there, and if you want to bring any administrators, not that they're probably looking for something to do Sunday afternoon, but certainly that'd be open. And again, the agenda will be pretty similar to what we did last time. There's some pre-work I sent, asked for that back by Thursday, sometime Thursday. Any discussion on the agenda for retreat? Next meeting is September 6th. It's our Appendix 6 complaint, so the agenda is simple. It's just hearing the complaint. The process is within the agenda item. So if you click on that item, it's in the public contact summary of the agenda.
Is there a video copy of the complaint that dealt with the one that was recently with Sabres? There was no
It wasn't video recorded.
audio or video.
Audio, but not video.
There's audio of it though. Okay. Could that be?
We're planning, this is the base plan.
Sure.
We're going to follow past practice.
Okay.
And so, so we'll plan to audio record it just like we did last time. And the process is actually the exact same as the last.
Right. My I guess the main part of my question would it be possible just to listen to it, just kind of see how that proceeding went, how it was handled, how it went.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I added was a little bit on time. So if you look at the process, I just gave a little guidance, like I don't think we're looking for a 6-hour meeting or.
Right.
I mean, I kind of expressed it to the point.
I was at that one and it seems somewhat consistent with how that one went. It was not very long.
Yeah, so I think we're going to follow past practice. It's an open board meeting, so I would preside over it. We don't have legal counsel. Both the sides will, but that's fine. I think it's an open board meeting. And
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
so we don't have legal counsel.
And we're not going to have any?
Nope.
Is that a problem?
I don't think
What
so.
if we need some advice?
Well, then do you want to have a special meeting between now and then?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking about is.
So this
you
isn't
know,
on we're in agenda setting, but.
No, what I'm worried about is that in any kind of litigation type thing, sometimes people work it out, especially at the last minute. And is that going to be an option for us if we don't have counsel? And what if somebody makes a settlement offer?
I'll preside over it, and we'll do that as a board.
Or wouldn't we want maybe some legal guidance if that happens?
Chris, again, we haven't set it up, and so if you want to set up meetings between now and then, there's a lot that would have to happen to make that happen. You can always table it. If you get into a sticky wicket, the way forward would be to table it.
Yeah, okay.
All right, anything else on that agenda? We're good to go? 13th agenda. I think we're probably going to put superintendent contract on September 27th. Take that note.
Now, the discussion on retaliatory culture, that type of thing, is that at the work session?
It looks like that's under section E there.
Oh, on the board
A
meeting?
little bit of both, yeah.
Okay,
So there's going to be a report out on the culture and climate follow-up.
okay,
And then we've also got it under the, well, it's the strategic goal number 3 in the work session.
okay,
Yep.
excellent.
I just got a quick question about that. Steve, and the person that's coming in doing the culture and climate, are they including the whole district? Like, is the board included in that, or is it just staff?
We are working with the ICEA right now to set up the process for it, so that has not been determined yet in terms of who they're planning on meeting with. Our presumption was that they were going to focus primarily on staff, based on the comments from inside the Department of Ed report. And that would include administrative staff at the district level, the building, teachers, support staff, et cetera. Could certainly include the board in that process.
I think that's a great conversation for Sunday.
Okay, I just think that that could be important
we-
as leaders
Sure.
about how much are we contributing also to the climate in our district.
That, just board goals. It
Sure,
could be-
sure.
Yeah.
I just didn't know the
Yep.
scope.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, so that's a great, perfect time to add it.
I think between our board goals and then these two topics, we can have that discussion, right? Okay, anything else on the 13th? And then the work session, it's a pretty busy work session. I think most of these will probably be talking process. And you can see it there. We'll add voluntary transfer.
You know, it might be helpful if in advance of that work session, we could just get a summary of what we have already asked DeYoung Richter for, or what kind of,
I'm sorry, on which
where
one?
things stand with DeYoung Richter and getting those enrollment projections. You know, what, are they already at work? Where are we with them? You know, if we can get
That's
some kind of
exact-
summary of that in advance, that would be good, and then we can
Yeah,
decide whether
we-
we want to ask them a few more things.
You bet, we can definitely do that. Adam's been working with them to make sure that they've got all the data that they need to get their process moving.
You know, I guess one of the things I'm wondering is, of course, we're going to get projections on the elementary areas that are currently the plan. But especially now that, you know, there's a possibility that the elementary zones might have to be changed, possibility. You know, are we going to ask them about specific sub-blocks that might be in play if we decide to do anything? And, you know, I just want to do some thinking about that, and maybe we've already asked them.
Yeah, that's exactly what the topic is. We're gonna go through that whole process and what might happen by when, and if there's,
We'll add that to it. I think that would be a separate item on here, so we'll add that as a separate item on the work
on
session
top
on
of
the
the
13th.
enrollment report, projections?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the other agenda.
Oh, okay.
To the right one here.
All right, anything else for the work session? I think we got it more than full already, so.
Can I just, I'm still lingering over this question of going into that hearing without counsel. And just in terms of agenda setting, what if we just added an item on the board retreat for agenda setting in case, after thinking it over, we decided, hey, we need to do something about that. So we'd have one last chance to do something about it before that hearing actually occurs. You know what I mean?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll think about what the topic is called. It's gonna be a very narrow topic,
Well, I would just
right?
say agenda setting on the board retreat. You know what I mean? So that if we decide, hey, maybe we should schedule some kind of session, either right before it or,
I got it.
You know what
Let me
I'm
work
talking
on
about, though. Yeah, I
what
don't-
we call it, yeah.
yeah, all right.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.